Hello everyone! Over the last several years, I have gotten a number of monster movie recommendations, especially of Japanese monster movies, but today's review is going to be one that nobody asked for. Let's chat about 1977's Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds. This film was produced by Toei Company, directed by Junji Kurata, and its Japanese title sounds something like Kyoryu Kaisho no Densetsu, literally Legend of Dinosaurs and Ominous Birds. The discovery of a huge stone egg in a cavern on Mount Fuji coincides with unusual phenomena, crazy storms, and an unprecedented number of earthquakes. And when people at a nearby lake start getting attacked and killed, a rumor spreads that local dragon folklore may be more fact than fiction. I had never heard of this movie until 1 week ago when a channel I watched that makes synth covers of sci-fi and monster movie themes posted a video that was titled Rhamphorhynchus in all caps, and I was like, what is that? Out of sheer curiosity, I clicked on it, and immediately I was like, yes! This is awesome! What is this from? I must know! The video had a picture, it was the poster art, and I thought it said Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds, and I thought, what the heck kind of title is that? Is that a movie? Is it a documentary? So first I looked up the original version of this track just to make sure that it was just as cool, and it was, and then I really wanted to know about this movie, so I looked that up, and lo and behold, it is a Japanese monster movie from 1977, really titled Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds. I went back to YouTube and found the movie, a very good quality upload. It's the English dub, which is not ideal, in my opinion, but despite having known about this movie's existence for all of 10 minutes, I wanted to see it, and I wanted to see it now, so I did. Did it live up to my sudden astronomical expectations? Yes and no. Like many of these films, it has stuff that's genuinely good, stuff that's not so good, and stuff that'll make you laugh, regardless of whether it was intended to be funny or not. There's some creative camera work and photography here, and a little monster vision, that's always fun, and overall it has good pacing. Action and attack scenes are nicely edited to maintain energy and suspense. Sometimes the editing's a bit wonky, though, as if a scene got cut off or the dialogue was split. And speaking of dialogue, there is one line that really stuck out.
And Franklin, who discovered electricity, found a toad one day that had been hibernating for several million years, and he brought it back to life again.
My mom looked at me and said, "He did?" I don't remember reading about that in any of my history books. Sometimes it's difficult to tell just what tone the movie's going for. Is it meant to be taken seriously or not? Are we supposed to be scared? Or were we expected to laugh in some of these scenes? The opening feels like some kind of surrealist horror movie. It begins with trippy, voyeuristic shots of a dazed young woman wandering in the woods. Who is she? What's she doing? Why is she looking around like that? Why'd she take her shoes off? Why does this feel kind of sleazy? And then she drops down a hole like Alice heading into Wonderland, coming to in a frigid cave where she's surrounded by blocks of ice and giant eggs. As she approaches one, we hear strange noises. It starts hatching, she sees a giant eyeball glaring back at her, and, understandably, she freaks out. It's a neat opener. Weird, but neat. Shortly after that, we're introduced to the main character, a guy who works for the Universal Stone Company, who travels to Mount Fuji to check out this egg story. Years before, his father had found an egg, but his theory that it belonged to a dinosaur was rejected and ridiculed. The son looks to clear his father's name by finding the egg and a dinosaur and proving it was all true. Others voice their suspicion, however, that he's just doing this for fortune and fame. And the character is so inscrutable that it's unclear just what his motivation is. Frankly, I didn't think much of him as a protagonist. I never felt I got to know him, and he does nothing endearing. Plus, he seems to be trying awfully hard to look hip. Individual tastes may vary, of course, but I thought he looked a bit silly with his too cool for school vibe and his dated wardrobe and accessories, the mesh shirt, the beige monotone outfit, the yellow shades. By the way, my mom called my attention to all the quirky hats on display here. This newsy cap beret combo, the alpine hat beside him, there's a visor over here, and this... What is this? Is he pretending to be a gambler in an old western? It's all very 70s, but so is the music, and that is one of the best things about the entire film. It's swingin', jazzy, funky, groovy score. It was written by Masao Yagi, a famous jazz pianist who was also a prolific film composer. I was delighted to hear the theme that introduced me to the movie. I was surprised, though, that it took a while to appear. It didn't stick around long when it did, and in total, it only shows up a couple times. It's a surprisingly varied score. There's the theme I've been obsessed with over the last week, which includes a motif that I believe strongly resembles a James Bond riff. But there's also some surfer music, there's a band that does a country western style performance, a grandmother sings an old lullaby about a dragon, and there's a prominently featured male vocalist, although I have no idea what he's singing about. He could be singing about what's going on screen, or he could be singing about something completely different. No idea. In general, the soundtrack reminded me of Godzilla vs. Hedorah, or Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. Lots of groovy music, a soloist, Bond movie influence, a mix of styles, music that's sometimes more peppy than the action seems to call for. Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster was 1971, so I'd say that the stylistic overlap makes sense. It quickly became apparent that Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds had a lot in common with one film in particular, Jaws, which had been the first big summer blockbuster just 2 years prior. Certain elements seem to be lifted straight out of the Steven Spielberg film. Fear of a killer beast in a large body of water, a sequence where people are attacked but we see nothing, action occurring during a special event. In Jaws, it's 4th of July weekend. Here, it's a festival at the lake celebrating the home of the legendary red-eyed dragon. Hooligans give people a scare with a fake fin, and there's a murky diving sequence where the divers discover a disembodied head in a tangle of seaweed, referencing the scariest part in Jaws. I noticed all these things and wondered to what extent Jaws was an influence on the production. I looked it up afterward, and it turns out this movie wouldn't exist if not for Jaws. The president of Toei Company was looking westward and wanted to emulate what was big in American cinema. When Jaws came out and took off, he studied it and purposely copied its formula to recreate its success. And it's hard to fault him for this because many other filmmakers did the same thing. He wove in the Loch Ness Monster legend as well because that was also becoming a big deal. So everything about this movie was designed to have global appeal, to be just like Jaws, but with Japanese concepts and symbols. It was very expensive to make, and unfortunately, it didn't come close to matching Jaws' success. It wasn't a huge hit in Japan, and it never got a theatrical release in the US. The only place it struck gold, amazingly, was in the Soviet Union. Not because of the monsters, but because of the technology and gadgets characters were shown using. My mom was very aware of similarities between this and the giant killer octopus movie Tentacles, an Italian-American co-production that also came out in '77, which was also piggybacking off of Jaws' success. I talked about Tentacles last year. I've put a link in the description if you want to check that out. Both movies have lots of diving scenes, a yellow raft in a secluded spot, dead fish floating in the water. At least I think that happened in Tentacles. Unusual but groovy music, a strong horror movie start, some dull spots, a lackluster romance. The romantic subplot here is between the main character and one of the divers with whom he had a fling before. There's still some spark between them, I guess. I wasn't really sold on it, but she's leery of him. It's not a particularly appealing love story. He doesn't act very charming, especially not when he freaks out and slaps her around at one point, and she just seemed kind of meh. It also doesn't help that their first potential love scene is interrupted by the appearance of snakes. Ugh, that was disgusting. They might actually be eels or giant worms, but it doesn't matter. I don't want it. Ugh. But the fact that there's any romance at all is one of the things that makes me wonder, who is this movie for? Because I'm thinking it's not for kids. There's more blood and guts than kaiju movies typically have. It shows people being attacked and eaten, which is rare in Godzilla films. It focuses on adult characters, which is not unusual, but it has a pinch of, we'll say, sexiness, for lack of a better word. It even has a shot of brief but entirely gratuitous nudity. So, I'm thinking certainly not for little kids, maybe teens? There really is an astonishing amount of gore, but that's actually one of the highlights. It's a distinguishing feature. One character falls down a hill and lands in horse guts. The headless horse corpse then disappears, only to be found later in a tree. It's gross, yes, but the scene is dark and foggy enough that you don't see much. There's also an attack scene that is especially vicious, but also strange. I wasn't sure what was going on in the slow motion part when it's just the victim and the monster staring at each other, but you get a disturbing clarification a moment later and a pretty good jump scare. The film does a good job delaying the monster reveal until almost halfway in, when the aforementioned pranksters get their comeuppance. They're caught in a sudden whirlpool, we glimpse a tail, and then the creature emerges. Cue the theme song, or at least part of it. Which, now that I hear it in context, I realize is awfully upbeat compared to what we're watching. A guy helplessly seeing his friends get torn apart by a sea monster. My first impression was that the creature, later confirmed to be a plesiosaur, is refreshingly different. What we see most is its head, and it's a good design, not goofy or anything, with remnants of its last meal clinging to its sharpish, bloody teeth. You can just imagine how rank its breath would be. For the bulk of the film, shots of the plesiosaur are quick, jumpy, and piecemeal. But later, as you start to see more of it, the novelty wears off a bit. So then the movie does the smart thing and introduces a second monster. A storm brews, glowing lights appear on the horizon, things seem like they're about to take a supernatural turn, and with this movie I wouldn't be at all surprised. And then suddenly a giant bird appears in the sky. It's Rhamphorhynchus! Cue the music again! So we've got a plesiosaur and a pterosaur. Supposedly, neither of these creatures is actually considered an official dinosaur, so the title is kind of a lie. They're also much larger than they should be, but I don't know. That's just what the internet told me. Much as I enjoy watching dinosaur movies, I'm still a little bit afraid of dinosaurs, so I don't study them at all. You get to see more of Rhamphorhynchus's full body, and this sequence reminded me a lot of the giant claw, especially in terms of visual effects and the angles they went with. But of course, it's a much better creature design. Well, okay, it's better. I'm not sure that I should say it's much better. Let's not get carried away here. The designs are convincing enough. Their movements are somewhat stiff, and the more you see of them, the more they look like museum displays, and their facial expressions become kind of derpy. But as long as you don't freeze frame it, they get the job done. It's when the fighting started that I got kind of bored. The choreography is slow and awkward with a lot of weaving and roaring, and as the editing and the visuals become repetitive, the magic starts to wear off and you start wondering, okay, how much more of this movie is there? I wonder if they knew that, and that's why they chose this moment to have the bird jab its beak into the plesiosaur's eyeball. That grabbed my attention back. And then it turns out the whole film has been building up to an epic eruption. This part was well done, with smooth inclusion of stock footage juxtaposed with the humans struggling to escape from the exploding mountain before it falls apart, and the creatures more concerned now with surviving the eruption than fighting each other. The only problem is, this climax, as exciting as it is, feels like it goes on for too long, and then it leaves you feeling kind of ambivalent, dissatisfied. So the movie was up and down for me. There were good scenes that I liked. There were even parts that I thought were great. But there were also not so good scenes. But it was never terrible. It was definitely entertaining all the way through, and it makes a very good effort. I just think it could have been better, and it wasn't as awesome as that synth cover made it sound. I hope you enjoyed this review. Go ahead and share your thoughts on Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds if you have seen it in the comments below. I look forward to hearing what you all have to say about this movie, and come back next week to find out what else I saw in May. Thanks for watching.